I think the quote is, without power, there's no speed, and without calories, there's no power. So that's a long way of saying I had a threshold session this morning. Recovery became the #1 priority by going and getting some food, coming back, relaxing, before later on at about 4 p.m, so 5 or 6 hours later, I go and I do similar, but this time a little bit quicker, and it'll be about 8 times 1K and not the 6-minute reps. It's a fun day of training because it's all kind of under control, but that's what brings me to what we're going to talk about today. I talked recently on a video, it was about varying the intensity of training. I include double threshold really because it allows you to do more volume at intensities that help you move forward, at intensities that help you become a better athlete, a faster athlete, a stronger athlete. I include them because I've included them before and it's helped me get better. As the weeks go by, I get a little bit quicker on the treadmill, a little bit quicker outside. That's a great thing. I also include them because I seem to handle it well and I recover well, and because I have the luxury of time to actually do a double threshold and recover and eat well and relax and make sure that the injury risk stays low. Not everybody has that time, but the video that I did recently was explaining that yes, threshold, zone 2, all this faddy type stuff plays a big role in what you should be doing in training, but also you need to understand that you must push your ceiling, which if we're discussing from a YouTubey or scientific kind of way, it's this 80-20 idea, 80%, maybe easy, 20% pushing a little bit. And one of the questions underneath that previous video was outline that 20. A lot of people know, yes, you want 80%, maybe recovery, easy, and then 20%, giving it a go, pushing on a little bit. But how does that kind of look? How do you break that down? If I was coaching you, how might I prescribe that? So it's going to be different for everybody. First of all, if you're only going to run, for example, 2, 3, maybe even 4 days a week, are you really going to dedicate 80% of that to easy and only 20% kind of pushing things, moving them forward? I don't think so. If you're the kind of athlete, if I'm you and I only run 3 times a week, I'm probably going to push every single one of those runs, if I'm honest. I don't know what science would say about that, but I just know that I'd be thinking, I only have 3 days to dedicate. And so as long as you can stay healthy, so long as you're not getting hurt, I'm not talking about going to a hill and running as hard as you can every day for those 3 days, but you might break that down into a little bit of threshold one of those days, maybe hills the other day, and then maybe like a harder sort of tempo-y type effort on the 3rd day. I think you should be trying to get the most bang for your buck for the time that you put in. That's just me. I'm not here to say that's the best way. I'm just here to say that from experience, from seeing the people that are doing, really well in the sport, from seeing other people progress their times in a really efficient and nice way, they're making the most of their time. If you have the luxury and you train 7 days a week, and maybe within that there's 10 to 12 training sessions, so there's even double days, absolutely. You've got your recovery stuff, and then you've got your thresholdy type stuff, and then you've got the days where you push on a little bit. But if you're only limited to those 2-3 days a week, I would really make the most of it. So if you're assuming that you're the kind of athlete that maybe runs 50, 60, 70 miles a week, maybe that's split over 10 to 12 sessions, or even 7, which is once every day. The way you want to go about this is some of your time is dedicated to long-term progression. That long-term progression is still going to help the next race, but it's also going to protect the longevity of your career, that you continue to improve each year, etc. Once you start doing, for example, when I ran my quickest marathon, I'm not saying the time because everyone gets annoyed. When I ran my quickest marathon, it worked out that I had done about 30 miles per week above easy. The actual breakdown of that was about 20 miles around the thresholdy type effort, and that next 5 to 10 was higher. It could have been 5 times a mile at maybe like 10K effort, and then you're looking at maybe some hills in there, or you're looking at 20 mile of it being sort of in the thresholdy effort, and the extra 5, so there's 30, 5 was the 5 by a mile, for example, a 10K effort, but the other 5 that we're not accounting for was probably a threshold day that got a little bit out of hand, maybe a mile here or 2 there. That's how the breakdown would be. That got me a brilliant result, right? 100-mile week, 30-mile of it was, really good. Most of it threshold, but then some of it, that higher end. So the way I have to look at it, and the way you should look at it, is if you currently do 5-mile, 10-mile a week at threshold, these are just random numbers. They're not, this is what you need to do. But if you run 50-mile, and 10-mile a week of that is threshold, right? That's 20% of your week. And then you also run 3 or 4 mile that's a bit harder. Maybe you do 6 times 1K at 5K effort, or 6 times 1K at 10K effort. You have to assume that the current level that you're at, that's what it took to get you there, right? And so once you start to take away from that, let's say you drop that number to, instead of 15 per week that was above that easy, let's say you drop that to 10. Over the next couple of weeks, some things will start to drop, because it's kind of like, think of it as, I go to the bank, I put in £200 every week, and so at the end of the month, how much is there? 4 or 5 weeks, £800 to £1,000. If you change that and you start putting in less, right? Well, obviously over time, the amount of money in the bank is going to change. And so you have to assume that some of the training that you're doing per week is to maintain the level of fitness that you've got to. Your thresholdy type stuff, these zone 2 steady runs that, are really useful. A lot of that, sadly, is just keeping you where you're at, right? So it becomes this is the training that I must get done, because this keeps me at the level that I'm at. And then you've got to start thinking about, well, where could I add a little bit more on top of what I'm currently doing, while staying healthy, while staying injured, that's going to help me move forward that extra little bit. So the breakdown then becomes okay, well, how much do I need to do? How much have I been doing previously? You have to have a look at it. You have to look at your own training there. You have to start to think, how much have I been doing above, say, easy, steady, threshold, etc. Break it down in terms of numbers. I just told you I ran 100 mile a week, and 30 of it was at a good intensity above easy. So I need to assume that to get towards my marathon type PB, I must do probably 3 to 4 months with at least 30 of my 100 miles in a good place, just to get back to where I've been to before. When you're then breaking it down, right, this is where it gets interesting. You need to work out as the athlete, what do you need to do to achieve that next goal? I don't believe that you can do all of that 20%, for example, if we're talking 80-20 and that's your breakup. I don't think you can do all of that at threshold and expect to achieve your best results. If you currently just do easy runs and you start adding in threshold, things will get better, but only for so long. So it depends how long you've been on this journey. The body just loves to be challenged in new ways, but you can't suddenly change your ratio. Maybe your ratio right now is 80% easy, 20% threshold. You can't go from doing 80 easy to 20 threshold and maybe bring threshold down to only 10%, and the other 10% you start working on 5K effort, 10K effort, but you've taken something away. So temporarily the results might get better, but then you might find another problem, because you say to yourself, feck, yes, I've added in a new stimulus, yes, it's helped, but suddenly you've gone from 20% of the week being threshold, maybe that worked out at 10 miles, to only 10%, 5 miles, you've changed the ingredients. So the ingredients is always, you have to think, when I achieved my best results, this is what was in place. 6 weeks of this, 10 weeks of this, 3-4 months of this. Then you need to say to yourself, where could I add or take away? And you have to do it in subtle ways that you're not removing things that have worked in the past. Or you've built this really good skill, this really good ability, and then you're just giving it away. So some of the training is to get things to a better place. Maybe it's threshold stuff. Maybe once you get to a point where you know my threshold pace is kind of at its kind of limit, I've never really seen it much quicker than this place. Well, then you think to yourself, well, I probably don't need to do as much of that now to hold it. It's easier to hold than it is to gain a skill, right? So what you can do then is you can take a little bit of the threshold away, not loads, just a little bit, because you just want to hold it now. Instead of 2 sessions a week, maybe you're doing 1, but then maybe the next week you still have to do 2. So you could only take little bits of it away. And then what you start to add in is you add in the specific work. So you've built this really good foundation. You've built the, the grounds, the basis of this new house that you're building, for example. And now what you've got to do is turn that basic, general, good fitness into very specific fitness. So all of a sudden it's, well, what's the goal race? If the goal race is a 10K or a 5K or a half marathon, well, then the sessions must be geared towards that. If it's a 5K, well, you're looking at start with 600 meter reps for about 5,000 meters. So what's the maths? 8 of them, 10 of them. Break that down. 600 meters at 5K pace, take 90 seconds rest. Do that until you get the 6,000 meters. I don't want to do maths. And then what you want to do is you might do 800s. Again, like I just talked about, up to 6,000 meters. Just a little bit over race distance. So again, it's probably like 6 of them or 8 of them. I don't know. And then you might do as your final session, you might do a 2K at 5K race pace, and then maybe 3 times a K, 4 times a K. But basically you're turning general fitness into specific fitness. So when you ask, what is the breakdown of the 20, that 20%? It's going to differ for every athlete depending on what you've been doing previously and what you're planning to do next, that next race goal. So in the tiniest way, or not the tiniest way, but hopefully the simplest way to explain this is train generally to get your fitness to where it's been, start to see some of those tempos come back to a good place, some of those track reps, get them back to a good place, and then turn that very good general fitness that you've got back to hopefully the best place ever into specific. How you break down that 20, that extra little bit, you need to decide what's worked for you in the past. Maybe after 3-4 specific sessions, you're already there. You're already ready. And then what do? You maintain that until race day. You protect that until race day. It's all about keeping your assets. Remember to handle more training than you've ever done before, to race better than you've ever done before. Recovery, psychology, strength condition, nutrition, all these important things. I preach it because it is the bigger part of what makes you a better athlete than the training. The 22 hours a day or 23 away from training is the most important part. So if you need more tips on that, check out joggingroom.com. That's my website. That's the running school. I think 60 hours of tips, 12 hours of tips, 60 lectures, courses, running plans, everything you could imagine. Check that out and take care. Enjoy your running. Enjoy your training. Don't be so hard on yourself. It's not that complicated, even though I might have complicated it further for you. Get really fit. Get very specific. That's all you've got to do.